Okay. Genrabache Touchdele Kukamsang and good morning, Katrina, and a very warm welcome to everyone online. We'll begin with some prayers that you'll find in the chat box as always.
To the teacher and Tao, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, full destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha and Tao, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, prostrate make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paid 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom motion like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing a path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field, endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, flame in a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe of false, and be delivered from the ocean of psychic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah. Oh, good. Oh yeah, yeah, chizonga bachi besole. Kaya sora kunji nyingbites. Kaya sora kunji nyingbites. Kesa tamba namje ngabalam. Kende tangdo namje yungo di chidan nishi taga shebarsha. Shesung batarsra. Kaya sora kunji nyingbites. Kaya sanje chumde dega sumbe. Sora namje nyingbukbe. Nyingbi chui tibana shigdo ape. 디 가르스나 교회서로 군님비 전에서 민중들의 소리 민중 기부 총무 값이나 냐와이다 전주 동에는 이조와 기분 전기 값이나 하단 밀어서ပဲ레다 뉴문bewang 교알랑 그 시제들 조아를 주도 간도 교알랑이야 동해랑 시시에 버터네 틀려 되니까서 모두 람이고 봐 코에 내다 르던 로지 상말이야 민중기야 돼 뒤순 거라 교회 소라고 님부터서 디페케 쳐버려 민중매나 고탄되게 지금 말아 실로 다들 야구매도 텔레 타고를 삼삼을 삼을 숙심 붙이거나 텔레 타에 탑시 가르도 따니 뛰치거라 탑시 치거라 민중매나 그 비시오 말아 가라도 다 텔레 시다 오늘 전에 랑리 투순알이네 야와이다 던조 뜻을 통해도 배 야부 계시 개발소요라 다들 사초 시도 시다 두 번째 시기가 말이야 시시해 야가시 시작을 했어요. 그래서 야와이다 던조 통해 시다 시작해요 말에 티 가르스 미스 삼르날 티다가 좀 저와메 어디 삼르 거다 띵원에 지는 가지고 계산된 로아를 두요라 삼촌을 대게 삼촌 대게 삼촌 대게 두시 대게 얼마다 미네 미기요 말에 티셔는 다들 남는 되는 것이 이마 그 개미 커뮤니즘 소라 커뮤니즘 별이어서 애는 가지고 배가 삼모도 국바 씹을 것도 국바 씹을 국바 꾸나서 애는 가시 본부 가시려고 그래 지난주 쉬고 말해 녀에다 던져지다 여 말해 연능 아주 애단 밤잡 그래 텔레케요 말해 미네 밀케요 여기나 메시지를 끼그래 마도시 녀에다 던져지고 말해 주 때문에 주지기도 안 돼, 때문에 되기도 안 돼, 지금도 와서 그래. 납작 작업을. 어디 서로서 아주 때 재미를 삼을 거다. 그 내가 그랬던 해서 때부터 서로 제마도 아주 지난 삼장으로 오였다 삼자 삼을 거 오면도 뒤고고여라. 뒤고에 돈을 남비도 지날 때 계시켜서 쓴 거야. 대신에 그거 말. 알레 티실라도 말다 그래. 어디
Mm. So here to begin, as Jailam Motsongkhapa has said, the very essence of all the Buddha's teachings, the path that is praised by the noble bodhisattvas, and the entrance for all fortunate ones desiring liberation, to the best of my ability I shall now set forth. So here, this first line that refers to the essence, the kind of condensed essence, the sort of nectar of all of the Buddha's teachings, this is referring to an attitude of renunciation, and not just a kind of renunciation from the rebirths as in the three lower realms, although for the being of small scope that is included, wishing to avoid a rebirth not just in the hell realms or hungry ghosts or as an animal, but recognizing that all of samsara is in the nature of suffering and thereby wanting to get out of that, right? And so having this attitude of renunciation is extremely important, because if we have a sense that the place we are isn't good, or the situation that we are in is something that is bad, then we are going to look for a method to be able to get out of that. And so here, this is something that is, again, really important for us to generate, this attitude of renunciation. And so here we can see that the kinds of sufferings that are experienced, particularly those of the lower realms, are explained in detail in the stages of the path literature. And again, it's not in order to be able to scare us or something, but these explanations are given in order to have us recognize that we cycle through these various types of rebirths through the six realms. And so often people don't want to talk about those kinds of sufferings. Like, they just want to sort of set that aside and not think about it, and have this sense of oh, well, I'm a human now, and so I'm going to be born as a human again and again and again. And so we sort of look at things like the animal realm is sort of like we're watching a movie. Like that's something other than what could happen to us, utterly unconnected from our own experience or what could potentially come to us in the future. We have this feeling of like, oh yeah, we're just going to be born as a human again and again. And so when the Chinese came into Tibet, just as a kind of story to illustrate this, they really looked at the Tibetans as being quite stupid. They would say, oh, you talk about these other realms of the hell realms and hungry ghosts and animal realms. We could just, sort of eliminate these through dropping an atom bomb on them. You guys aren't going to be born there. It's like in the same way that when we plant a barley seed, a barley sprout is what comes about. Humans are always born as humans. And so they looked at the Tibetans as being quite stupid, as if like, well, how are you're human now, so you're always going to be human in the future. What are you talking about these other realms for and describing the kind of sufferings that one endures there? And so here, again, the reason that this is explained extensively within the stages of the path literature is because it's not something utterly unconnected to us, right? We often look at them as like, oh, that's a nice story, a nice sort of movie of something that happens to other people. But the reason that this is explained is because we cycle through these 6 realms. We could potentially be born in such a realm as a hell being or a hungry ghost, an animal.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Indica soda. Razo ci Galand is an Dameda. Is a Nyaida Tondula Sobatazul Kia, you are desam. They cannot to make a dos, Tandagan Musum Tonta, Alenia to the Masam Tondulia to make a detora. Yes, it them by Shandy Kursu, Karche, Chalana, she pitches, said to Karina Chachoda. Tinashin Kurnia turned to the Madon Bamara. Titung Chadwa de Mila Yusungdwa. May Signi Segni Shikungi Mabudwa. Kane Tani teaching Shikungi Mabudwa. Oh, Tinashin Shikichi said to Gangachedwa. Or teach the near Tunga Chadwa, the Marazumila Yusungwara. Or did the Sole Kina Tunga tended to do some other some Guyara. And the taking also some Gumaro, so when the lot of Chicoms and a Kabja Kumgira, my Latin or Jurgaritin, Sank and teachers, Tachiram Mobania, Omachina, Yeta, Tandu, Kenneth, and the Yangura, that's when I send the Conquera, so betili Kevich, our Titumishita, the young Yogu, Tio Medusa, and it to me attend some Shukshan Buyongura, or the Kasoda. Tomato and Jimmy Sambora, Chonel Lamrichimuta to Zonalpe, Yabuora Mise, or tinted Shirakesh gave somewhat to do some. And a telephone can yanga to us some service. So as a liver chaguyara, and to the Soashita Levi Yomada, Kitchen Shuda, Yawada to really get it. Tambu Tambute. Timmy to Dalinicar, she was the time. Or dear some good dogs. Sure, yes, to Chima Shanakun, Tikayala, make yes, it is Shagomara. Sendelia, Sosotewa, Shalet Hawapa, Pemba troops, and Sedilla Namida Kanga, they were at Tiki at the Shagora. Tendeshavian and they would Namitalia, Chama, Sambula and Latam Meta, Nyawayita, Tonduli Kigres, Debunamitility of Gresegora. Tata Great Sendelate and Dolti Quores Shagora. Madoki Shima Chanja said the Karchen chess to the Shagomara. Or the Ducasura. Megachula Soba. Nyawita Tonduli Kishi Kutu to Teletende, you let Telekuti Pandu Shigra. Tina Nation Soba on the Yunguda, Shana Sawachani, Jenny, Nyawita Tonduli Kigora, Tungakanga Yungora. Oh, that shall never read the sun, she can do some. Pento with the Karina took to some Messicora to the Shikarina. Randa Namita Namju Dodish said the Congress of Tadanda. So I get Tado and dancing Notus Nodura, some Simda Noduda. Any mission that I rang when it took good and make you so attended you Shagra. But today, Janet Ranita Audiogara. He decided to get Pemba the day should choose so far. Joe Mambula Pemba, the Joe Mambula Desher, Chusha with this. Pemba said the Maombani are no mentally so good. 펜바 대화스도 단다 대회된다 쓴 거라 신디 지속거라 대고요에 낭미다 소소가가 세번 기부요해 기부요에 될 류기 기부단 셈기 기부자 망자의 셈 주는 미기와 차거도 등아 정의 숨 통되기도 지속 따다 벤조 짠짠 유연에네 배 셈리 동에 매비 지금 했던 데라 벤조 짠짠 류소에 짠다 땡도 빼표 숨서 보였나 셈기 셈레데 들 망아래 정도도 등아 정의 숨도 두고 알아 사워든데 매요에 또 쓴 거라 근데 최소한테 가리는데 고쳐고 뺏겨서 버려도 담보다 어딘데 고아 가서 녀에다 전주를 깨나 저 말에서 교화 상부 간장 라와체는 라요 말에서 교황에 버튼 들 깨시브레서 뒤에 라다 라게 뒤도다 들어와서 라게 레ken지 기대치를 따그라 라게 뒤도들이야 라를 라와체 매신다지 원시대는 아니 년가 신부시다라 되다 제 용신에서 요 말아. 근데 전에 교강에는 교대단 특별제고 연구를 마다. 아니 교육계획 때 무엇이다지 요 말아. 근데 대표 계셔버려. 예선 그 등에 삼을다. 제일 계획 교대. 아니 미기와주 샬라 초합 방법들에 삼으라. 제 초합 방법들 세번에 제딜라 라데와 교화 시행대와 교화 신문남이 되고 야본용에 봐. 근데 이지 정선에는 그 며칠에 근데 추주지 또다 되고 뭐 사고 말아. 근데 추주지 또다 며칠 시다 땐도 땡게 말아. 근데 추주지 또다 야 근데 되고 싶은데 사고 말아. 어디서다 기부 총을 삼을 때배 담보 깨쳐버려. 나라지 기부 총을 깨충수지 그래. 나라다 근데도 저 남주시 안들야. 소화선대사 그 다음에도 같이 양자 총자를 겸줘야 돼. 소화를 거기도 뇽람도 단다 직체 근데 연애다네 뒤 양식으로 갖고 팀에서 하든 대송비와라 당부 시든 들었다 저는 이번에 선반들이 알람 주베 좀 버셔도 저번 매번에 좀 자자 연애다 당분에 대송 그거 말아 사 교를 때는 제부지요 그런 말도 시리 근데 되게 좀 보시라라 뒷장장은 기부 총을 쳐도 오늘 양딱 같이 수든 틈버시에는 밑단단 데버려 살았다 근데 교화 심만 하다 미 교화 방질랑 거라 교화를 꿈지 잡아도 교화 꿈지 되게 내부터 교화 심만 돼 쳐줘라 차와 방법 한번 주에 꿈지 들려도라 아저니 교화는 교화 공내 공도 앞에네 마찬가지로 넘어가도 온 거라 뒤에 띵아서 계신 분이 삼고도 야 어디서
So here, when we take rebirth, we have to recognize that we could potentially be born as a hell being, as a hungry ghost, as an animal. And really, although we aren't able to see the realms of the hell beings and hungry ghosts, we can see the realm of animals. We can understand the kinds of sufferings that they endure, of being sort of stupid, being exploited and used for their skin, for their labor, for their meat, and so forth. And so here, other than they're not being seen, we can't say that the hell realms and hungry ghost realms don't exist. We can think about the kind of sufferings, the way that they are described within the stages of the path literature. How, in the hell realms, you might be burned alive, you might be chopped to pieces and so forth. And we can see sort of pieces of that suffering within the human realm, but kind of imagine what it would be like to actually experience being born in such a place. And often we sort of set that aside. We don't think about it. We're sort of like, oh yeah, I'm a human now, and maybe I'll be a god, and then maybe I'll just become a Buddha. But really, by contemplating the various sufferings that we could very well experience in the future, should we take rebirth in such realms, then that strengthens our wish to be freed of those. That really gives us the impetus to pursue actually avoiding such a rebirth. And so here, contemplating the kinds of sufferings that one one could potentially experience in such a rebirth as they are laid out in the great stages of the path, it's really good for us to think about to think about this, even if we don't do so like really extensively in depth, to think about it such that we have a feeling, like a feeling of, I really want to make sure I avoid such a rebirth. And so here we need to understand, I mean, the purpose of Dharma, we talk about Dharma practice really being for future lives, but it is something that is beneficial to us in this life as well. It's not just about gaining a good rebirth in the future, but it's also beneficial. It brings happiness to us in the present. By engaging in positive actions, by avoiding those kinds of harmful actions, we are going to bring good to our lives here and now. We will bring happiness to ourselves and those around us. And in the future lives, experience the kind of ripening results that come from such beneficial actions. And so here, if we want to avoid the kind of negative rebirths, rebirths in those lower realms or a bad future, then we need to avoid the kind of causes that bring those about, particularly abandoning the 10 non-virtues and getting rid of, however much we are able to, any sort of activity that causes harm. And any sort of activity that is beneficial to others is something we should strive to engage in. I mean, in us as an individual, when we experience anger and jealousy and desire and pride and so forth, that causes us suffering here and now. And the more that we decrease those kinds of attitude, the happier we will be in this very life, as well as creating causes for a good kind of future rebirth. And so here, the Dharma, again, is something that is explained for the benefit and happiness of beings. The benefit is in terms of the ripening results that we experience in the future, but happiness too is what it brings about in this very life. And when we think about happiness and suffering, there's both mental and physical happiness and suffering, but really our mind, when our mind is disturbed, that is the greatest cause of our suffering. And when our mind is happy, that really brings about true happiness. We can see that even those who are, say, extremely wealthy, who have lots of possessions and are well endowed in that way, that doesn't alleviate completely the mental suffering that they experience. They might even have more mental suffering due to the wealth that they have. And so recognizing that the Dharma is really important for us in the present as well as in the future. And we recognize that whatever kind of experiences we are going to have in the future are connected to the actions that we do now. Our future happiness and suffering, both in terms of where we are born as well as future circumstances that we encounter, are dependent upon the actions that we do now. It's not as though there is some being that is going to give us happiness and suffering. That would be really kind of scary. But actually, it is the case that the causes that we create are going to bring about like results. And so we need to think about the causes as much as we are able to avoid any kind of acts that bring harm to others. And as much as we are able to engage in positive, beneficial actions towards others, then we are going to create our own happiness. We are going to ensure that we're not born in the lower realms and we're not going to be subject to those kinds of sufferings. And so the contemplation of the being of small scope, of recognizing the importance of our own actions in terms of protecting our ethical conduct. This is something that we know how to do, right? Often we think that we can sort of jump ahead, like, oh, I want to go to those higher stages. I don't want to just be at the first stage, but I want to go to the second, the third, the fourth. Well, we can't just jump past this. This is the foundation upon which everything else is built. And so if we really have a strong foundation of the contemplations of the being of small scope, this is something that is so important. As much as we habituate ourselves to avoiding harmful actions and bringing about beneficial actions, we also not only experience the good ripening results of that, but we carry that habituation with us into future lives and have that as a foundation upon which we can build our practice.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, thank you, Kasoda. Oh, today, Lunga Yesum Bikone Ranamju. Message to thing as a message on the titular good watch it. Kaneke shed down simply some that the Luigi Chilam to live do. Oh, thing you might have is to sometimes raw. Shall it saw by the shell saw of Jenna? Shall it to me young grace some gora? Shall it to me young grace some? This also me never can to me young gura, me young gura. 샬레 동해 연구를 띠저기요 말씀 띠 시송교라 저월 시송교라 거저대 동해 중에 중서 사도나 시삼르다네 거기 네버 빠야다 띠게 섬을 고고 말아 자 거저대 동해 연구를 삼 저와게 닝지실 시송교라 산제 때문에 닝지랍도 쳐와서 담부 시송사들 송교라 대인도 가서라 밀리 동해 연구를 되게 말해서 뒤돈달래야 되지거라 뒤인데는 지알이야 동해 전에 되게 말해서 팬도 두개 돼 시알에 때와 연구를 팬도 그렇고 가부 연구를 삼 뒤돈다 그 뒤지거라 팬바 두개 돼 뒤인데는 그 뒤돈다 메시게 제때 수술령아 예수 돈에 뜰려 돈 하지 다이 대사 많이 밝혀 통만 매번에 뒤에 저랬으면 뒤지 뒤버도 다 하고라 대 잠질에 시순이 저반 팬바 두개 돼 삼바 삼부시는 뒤버다 하고라 뒤버다에 잡셔대 남바 산제 바이 산제 손이 추가가 서부트인데 되게 말해 다그 말해 서굴 소소소소 깔레트에 뒤집고 다그 말해서 샘게 밀에 쳐와전에 뒤버사고라 망샤대 밀에 쳐봐야 돼 팬바도에 뒤집어다 그래서 거라 뒤집어다에 소도 참바다 인지 change 심 때려하고 매서도 저 뒤집어도 다 하고 거래 경험 마사지 뒤집어 단다 소소의 삶도 깨와 통만 매번에 뒤집어 마부사요 그래서 그래서 마디리 삼나는 아마 사베 뒤집어 마부 다 하고라 아니 천대 곰실이야 그 깨와가 삶도 숙침부 사와방야의 팬바도에 삶도 숙침부 연구도 아니 마시스는 여얼마 요로스네 두인스네 도요 마로 콜라드밀 규디사스도 라드밀 끼그라 어디인데다 디톨리아 소저 단드네 다 라드밀이야 참메제 코라 디시스네 다 메제들 동에 요에 망부요를 깨가 나실라 소바테서 요데 다 밀라야 그 예선을 때때 야구시다세테 이네 동에 도아 삼사 세대 동에 미 동에 삼다 라 사이 동에 삼다 라메 코알라 깨시제들 깨와 개와 나와 시와 안되와 제들 메도바 토도 다 동에 망부요라 무슨 얌요라 알아서 닝부케 메게지 무슨 얌요라 상로마당 마도시 어디인데 텐데 연구에 삼사티 삼다네 아니 메다 바다라 텐데 서바 공메다 텐데 삼다나 때껴지만 타르바 토에 시디에 송구도 타르바토에 시제 소구도 싸워도 마서 찍어도 마서 찍어 격이 와라 찍대 격이 와라 그 타르베 시축방이 배송구도 뭔가 예뻐야 공도 봐야 차도 봐야 삼바사르산타나 타르베 시축이 와라 근데 들으지 야우리야 돈이야 타르바토 오르마다 도비하고 제토에 시용하라 어디에 아니 껴와치마 사다미 고바 도비야 뒤에 최다 팀바 삼을도 숙침부여서 아니 타르바 도비야기 시 탐제 김배 공반토에 실려서 가가 쳇들 박사야 무샤셔되네 때 코네 콘데야 페도라 어떻게 전에네 다르와 탐제 김버시 아드레 삼을 당구르마도 도비아고자 질다가 스테이션에 아니직 도비아고자 지질랍게 안드서 예삼나 남바티 마디라 소소소소 레야고치네 소소 탈고야라 어디 손이야
So, here, when we think about really what's important is what we are doing with our body, speech, and mind, our three doors. That is the kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of our practice of Dharma. And really, we should do this on the basis of recognizing that when we create harm, when we do harm, we bring about suffering to others. And when we do things that are beneficial, we bring about their happiness. And so it's really the case that the Buddha Dharma is based upon this foundation of love, looking at other sentient beings as feeling beings. If we instead look at them as sort of like inanimate objects, like rocks or stones, and we're like, it doesn't matter what I do to them, whatever, we don't care, then really that is a wrong way of looking. The Buddha Dharma is really based upon an increase, the development of this attitude of love and compassion, wherein we think that, well, if I do things that are harmful, harmful, that brings about suffering to others. And therefore, we pay attention to what we are doing with our body, speech, and mind, whether it is harmful or whether it is helpful, based upon this recognition that it brings suffering and happiness to others who are feeling beings. And when we have that kind of attentiveness to our actions, we will also be by the way, sort of purifying the kinds of negativities that we have accumulated since beginningless time. We recognize that in countless previous lives, we have engaged in negative actions, and by transforming our activities of body, speech, and mind toward that which is positive, eliminating those kinds of actions that are negative, that are harmful, and bring about suffering to others, we naturally purify and cleanse those kinds of negativities that we have accumulated in the past. And we can't, as the Buddha has explained, we can't purify our negativities through some sort of external process of washing or something, cleaning that away, but rather it is by developing a counteracting mind. It is by eliminating that sort of harmful attitude and developing our wish to benefit others that we are then able to ensure that we have a good rebirth in the future. And so this is the kind of initial level, the foundation. And again, the foundation is this attitude of love and compassion that extends to other sentient beings, and really a wish to not harm them and to be of benefit to them. And then we contemplate, though, that even if we are to, through our good acts, ensure that we have a good rebirth in the future as a human or a god, we can see that this is still in the nature of suffering. Like, we know from direct experience the kinds of sufferings that we endure as a human, the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the sufferings of meeting with that which we don't want and losing that which we do want. And so we can think about the kind of sufferings of a god as well, but we have this direct experience of what it is to suffer as a human, and thinking about then impermanence, the fact that we are in this kind of situation wherein we are going to constantly be subjected to new sufferings. It is there that we build the foundation of striving for liberation, of achieving liberation, like in the way that we build a foundation and then build up the walls on that. As much as we recognize the kind of sufferings of that are created through our various afflictions and make an effort to reduce them, our anger, our pride, our jealousy, and so forth, we are setting down the kind of imprints of liberation and the future imprints of the state of complete enlightenment. We shouldn't think that these are things that sort of happen instantaneously, that all of a sudden you're just boom, liberated, or that you become a Buddha just like that. But rather it is through this process of laying down imprints that we are able to eventually achieve those kinds of goals. And it is through this kind of practice of a basis of ethical conduct, of abandoning harming others and benefiting others, and the foundation of that, then we build on an understanding of impermanence and so forth. We shouldn't expect there to be sort of like, oh, the Buddha just blesses you and all of a sudden you're enlightened. That's not the way that it happens.
Oh, yeah. Tende samlu tandu tende, kibun dringi samlu tandu mitaba dan, tungyawa dan, rawa. Ane tongba nyi se, rab tuzu keche yungu yara. Mitaba samlu tan, rawa. Ane tungay natan kwa, tungay natan nalu. Nyawa yeda tandu kya mare. Me la, lama kawa kena ko. Tungay jiri ashi kyang yinba. Tongma meba ne, tandu se kor, yon, tungay nyanya. Ta tanda dus ta meba kora de rea samlu kona. Mune kuali ya nginjo di kune chik setan dembar si yungora. O ngune tare si yuna da karimu kari si kune si kuya si reto amado pe nyangare samsa su soaleb gira. O ti letu zantane karsa ura. O ti tundali ya. Mida tunge tong tambe sa kom chi dire samlu tandi. Simli ya yuandu ura to yuandu ura. Yuandu do o ne nga se rawa nam yu samde ko mido asam. Ngāda ngā shenjā che te sā shī kāngi tāndu shenjā che sā kā namgyū samu koya te tabi ngā chi te medwa samsa ngā dā meba samu tōs tā rā nē medā pa samu tā che nā samli hā yuwa rūya rā chungu yu sā rā samli hā yuwa rā chungu tu tā tā ngā shenjā che sā yu te me te le shenjā chungu rūya yu rā ane ngā tsū sā ngā lū ngā chi ngā tsū sā shenjā kesa ngāla goya sa shenjā kesa yu to zula 동반이 삼로다 주주서 시점에 소소 남주 삼분의 신매버들 삼로 코르소나 텔레 현자된 요르도 요사라 매버 차네 신시 매지 신자 단단내시 대뱅에버 매도 왔음 매버 차네 샤바세데 매버 차서 도왔음사 뒤인데네 차베 유면은 더 유한요 말아 고도 유한요 말아 소소 차베 신자 지사 지자 딘디만디 전에 고도 용거라 아니 고도 돼야 어찌 지금 매버 써도서 나 거에 주디 고대 지금 매버 써야 도왔음 니모셔야 돼 삼들은 소소 장제 먹고데 심지어 현대 방마다 인들을 써보 대조인의 찍버려 삼사 건조시 제는 제지 다른 도와 삼사 뽑을래그라 인도래그라 어디에는 심지어 탐제에서 삼을 거르고요라 담부 소소 코아나 단날도 야고 삼다나 아니 심지어 탐제에서 삼을 용토다 랑신 코코용 거라 지기질리지기질리지기래병 거리도 어디에는 내 심지어 탐제 동에다 잡아서 대화다 대부터 소시치고 삼다는 말을 그러셔서 아니지 마시 진대세라 도서 강가 삼고거라 어디에는 다 심지어 탐제해야 돼 개발해야 돼 심지어 수인의 리버시 랑다 나주다 남미세 까치르시라 아니 롱바레 소소 롱바 짜자 신자 잠불에 코란 미가가 찍고 차라 대체되네 남게 대개별 심지어도 대화들라 동에 매도가 신지되라 정말 찍버리 삼고 가라 단단한 줄이 수제 13 코드에 와라 삼부셔주고 강인의 가져서 춘중에서 연텔레셔서 직수 현대 차단 계속 신의를 소대 와라 그래서 심지한테 맹게 차기 와라 탐절이야 뒤에는 영문만 붙이고 넣어두고라 심지어 탐제에서도 다 심지어 인버스미 개발을 차라 소소 삼도 날이야 수인의 인 그러 라인의 인 돈도인의 인 소소 펜터인의 내가 쟁게는 내가 때문에 가가자 내가 쟁게 요아를 펜터고 요아를 장장게 요 말어 어쩐데 개발을 통해 와라 산 개발 뒤에는 심지어 탐제에서 미보더라 마도 심지어 관광 오시르르르 것이 스르르르서 소설을 전다 줍시에 이렇게 두에요 말아 어디데 네 심지어 탐제 동안에 들어갔던 시하고도 삼사 대체도 따라 그런 것이 연대 군대지 가사시 저부터 삼네 네 사로 신시자리 신자의 야르야르 란도르네 탐제 신게 삼바삼부 탈신게 시럽 탈신게 탑도 시럽이가 탈신베 사이지 고반지 도와샤고도 삼 어딘데 삼로 고토에 요라 이제 어딘데 삼로 따지 심지어 탐색에 좀 깨고서 연대 군대지 가사시 좋아하시는 있으면 대체도 단단히 깨나를 인해 세바시겠어 연대 나를 인해 교를 깨바시는 있으면 대체도 안에 저 태바시기 삼바시기 결로 꿈지시기 있으면 대단단을 chuy연기 있으면 chuy연만 내시 삼로 소소 삼로 따기 있어 뒤중저 삼중 삼바나시 하고서나 하고서 마셔 야내양도 삼로 따기 있어 야내양도 삼르다네 야내양도 야 고네 패데 춘이래 대삼르다고라 심지 연대생게데 장바다니지 가리네 고 야제 거리스당 것은 야내양도 고메데 마도 산다게 주고 말매 사고 막 해셔 말어 양자 공부셔도 그 세전도 내게 매셔라 간시를 등하면 다디 사 농당 말 랑게 등당하마도 곰곰곰 야제로 해라 자, 티코 공대 샘비에 대해서 랑게 링당 아마데 링대 코란 잡으시 공공공시 야르 패도 우리셔라. 티마도 탑시신다 말. 티 같이 섬수 공기나 체제 야게 레메버시고 만가라 섬르나 티코다. 같이 섬르다나 게만다시레 때 섬상을 마투르 엑스리 초대요라. 이나고 야르로 요레 네요 말아. Kandi kaya ba hakutu sataka domedu samsa samluko sigra matosi ko yaje madosi yo markaje samudana nivacheru cheru juda masunu ko jujin saru maru madugara o tende jene semje tamje ga tutunge keguse yende kundeji kansashi juraje teshido nimere ne titandal samuta changi sam o titandal tebashi sam tebete susu samutangi sam 대 야내야도 하고서는 야내야도 공기 인삼 전에는 탈심을 연구를 했었는데 소소소소 땡들지 타제고도 마음만에 가진 거나 단다더라고 되게 요마한테 네바도 지금 삼삼삼나 빼럽sembo 아니 교랍sembo 어디에 삼루다네 심지어 탐제가 좀 게 그것에 연대 군대지 가서진 요하셔인서 대세도 단단해 뒤에도 다 터바다 삼바 고바시네 중이 대도다를 주냐기 삼루단기 삼자 근데 공부세 때문에 삼바 쇼스탄디스 많다서
So here it is then on the foundation of the contemplation of the being of small scope that we then move to the being of middling scope, contemplating impermanence, the kind of suffering nature and emptiness and so forth, recognizing that it's not just the lower realms that are in the nature of suffering, but even those higher realms of rebirth as a human or a god entails being in the nature of suffering. And it is the case that we cycle uncontrollably, taking up one set of aggregates and casting that off and going again and again through that. And so really, when we contemplate this, we should do so to the point of having a feeling about it, a felt sense of the kind of situation that we are in, and a real feeling of renunciation, of wanting to get out of this cycle of suffering. And this is then where the contemplation of emptiness and of selflessness comes in, recognizing that when we contemplate in this way, we have the ability to transform our mind from the kind of ignorance that grasps at a self, that clings to this I, that as if it were truly existent, as if it were sort of autonomously, objectively existent in and of itself. And it is due to that clinging to an I that we then cling to like mine and my side, my people, and so forth. And it is then on that basis that we generate a kind of attachment to our own side and an animosity for the other. And so here, when we are able to recognize that there is no such I and eliminate that kind of clinging toward an I, we eliminate that kind of attachment towards my body, my friends, and so forth. And so too, eliminate the kind of animosity toward the other, the aversion towards those that are considered to be other. And so we have to give rise to this kind of understanding that actually all sentient beings are the same in that they all, although we have sort of relationships of familiarity with some of them now, it is the case that they have all been close to us. So giving rise to this kind of confidence and mental fortitude that recognizes not only do we have the ability to eliminate our own cycling within samsara, but we also have this kind of commitment to others, thinking that, well, it's not right to just think about myself alone. It's not just suitable to only think of my own needs, but actually to recognize that all sentient beings have acted kindly towards me. And so here we can naturally sort of bring this about through coming to understand, to look at all sentient beings without sort of partiality, just from the point of there being sentient beings, being those who feel. And so thereby we are able to extend this kind of understanding, a wish to free all sentient beings, not just those in our immediate family or just in our country or in our continent, but those, or even just all the humans in the world, but rather extend to all sentient beings equal to the extent of space. And so we can get rid of the kind of partiality, the attachment and aversion that we have, and really recognize all as being equal, whether they're human or whether animal or whether a god, that whether it's someone who has benefited me or hurt me, we can see them all as equal and recognize that they all deserve to be freed from suffering. And we have this ability to generate a more and more sort of positive kind-heartedness, love, and compassion that extends to all sentient beings. We have this sort of capacity. And when we really understand that capacity and give rise to a kind of confidence, a kind of mental fortitude, then the wish wish arises to ourselves, become a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, who has brought to its culmination method and wisdom, who has perfectly developed the ability to be of benefit to others. And we give rise to that kind of wish within ourselves. May I myself become a perfectly complete Buddha, one who has eliminated all faults, who has developed all good qualities. And in order to strive toward that state, I am going to begin from now, trying to eliminate every sort of faulty mind that I have and develop every good and positive quality. And I do that through first hearing the Dharma and then having heard that and reflected on it. And it's not just hearing this once, but hearing it again and again and contemplating it again and again, meditating, integrating it into my mind that this is possible to achieve the state of Buddhahood. It is the nature of our mind that the more that we habituate to something, it can become more and more ingrained, actually without any sort of limit. This is the natural capacity of our mind, that what we develop within it, what we meditate on or habituate it to, is going to increase more and more. Those kinds of sort of minds of a similar type, the more that we integrate them into our mind, it is the case that that will grow stronger and stronger. The more that we contemplate the sufferings of samsara or the love and compassion for other sentient beings, it increases and develops. This is just the nature of the mind. We don't need to quote the verse, but this is something that is established, that we have the ability to develop really without any kind of limit. It's not as though we can just sort of take some kind of medicine to develop our love, to increase that, but it's through developing moments of feeling love towards all sentient beings that that will increase and develop. It's through seeing the faults of our afflictions and reducing those, that those will naturally decrease, right? And so sometimes we might have this thought of like, oh, well, it doesn't feel like I'm improving. It doesn't feel like my mind is transforming, but we should have faith in the process that our mind is constantly transforming. The more that we habituate to something, the more that it is going to increase and develop. The more that we reflect upon something, that is going to develop more and more. And we have the ability, our mind has this capacity to bring that to its complete culmination in the state of Buddhahood, to become a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And we shouldn't think that this is going to happen in a short period of time, but really have the kind of mental strength and fortitude that says, this will definitely come about, and however long it might take, I'm going to pursue that path. I am going to pursue eliminating individual faults and developing good qualities such that I myself may become a perfectly enlightened Buddha in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And for that purpose, I'm going to listen to the Dharma, contemplate on it, meditate on it in order to achieve that state for the benefit of all sentient beings. So please, let's set a good motivation for listening to the Dharma.
Oh, yeah, that they listen. Oh, that they don't, but the solo go. 2020 嘛，哦，2020，刚才的早，那边的酒吧刚引进是，哦，这当嘛的是老那个么的，当嘛的可的是呢，
Direbe.
啊，给他台湾前边等到，台湾中午，这样没事那时候他等到，台湾全部当给全部等的主要等到了，台湾春秋都做了当过的是，东面到春秋娘过那娘过的是，台湾前边等到，这是有的。这样没事那是，这呢，年习为等到鸡蛋鸡蛋的呀，面包都是个那在到烧个鸡巴来教育等到了呀，那个不等那个是下就接了说话的啊，哦，真的没啥看过，真的啥过来的，哦，真的用个了，真的结果多是个了，哦，习为等到面包到给呢。미신배 매를 소바 침버시바 지금 도와세 어안데 뜻은 되게 말베시고라 어제 당화를 봐 많이 배 충분히도 치매당 시송바 따르차오스 다때와 첨부터 다유나 대단다 충을로 당원 마도 때와 충주지 된다려 첨부로 다 대치기어 말해서도 대질람나 담보
둔주도 칙 말베.
지르기
뭐
든지 든지들이
뭐
든지 든지들이
가르사
든지 든지
둔주도 니이나.
든지
든지 든지 그래
어
다래. 아,
딘주도 니 얘기를 해라. 내나 당월 미리발랑아. 두면 충 그냥 첨보 셀 리바 디마르베.
메신게데 데타티게. 든지 가제사. 든지르베.
딘주도 치익디 사송이네. 딘주도 니 고츠도두스.
야야. 어디야 켈레. 니도. 든지 젠타해도도. 야, 어디 접샤들 다 접샤. 어디샤. 다 든지 든니들에도
라리.
어디를 따다래. 가르쳐도 쓰나. 그치, 니게지 택바 첨부를 당화를 대해서 다 택바 첨부대 야구 면도서 뒤치 캐말에게 년도 된이 요르와. 년도 대바서 남배 죽다 뭐 나리야. 같이 그때 택바 첨부 캐는 게 엄마로. 진도 뒤가시도 쓰나. 그치, 니게도 택바 첨부를 당화를 대해서 아니, 고통을 소배 같이 첨부 메시베 실다. 사무 또버 가게 치시나스. 아니 택바 첨부 전에 심정이 돼도 소소르다 소다 간가 침바당고도 하세. 아니 동반이 세지 시에도 하세. 대배 곡하고 제 동반이데 근데 삼로 단에 가야 맹게리 소르거라. 근데 대인이가 야구면 도서 탑기 전에 상부인세 상마소소고다 간가 심정이 돼도 당고다 대야구 말했으거라. 에테나시야 테네루 타두디 또에 돈달이야 동반이 다 매봐 동반이 다로 쉐탐제 동반이 세대 공부티 꼭하고 이 거나 야구 말했지 최다 longi 삼겨라 가게 매게 적도 없어 어때 선생 택바 전부터 야구 메두스 택바 전부 송샤부터 산제 까마레세 그 치수 중에 택바 전부 가서 공부를 두다 대속이야 네 소샤를 마도 상기가 말했어. 어딘데 시거라. 미리테세 고통알라 소베 가제 전부 메시베시다. 사무도 아까게 치시다. 어디지 라면 담보수 또 바꿔야 돼. 야.
So here, just again establishing where we had left off, and I believe it's with verse 372. So here there are some that sort of disparage or despise the great vehicle, thinking that or asserting that that isn't the actual teaching of the Buddha. So some of the like Shravaka tenant schools, those philosophical schools, don't accept that the Mahayana is the teaching of the Buddha. And so here, this comes under the first topic is that it's although there might be a little bit of suffering, it's logical or it's right to sort of endure that because it dispels a great suffering. And so some might say that, well, it's right to have this kind of animosity toward the great vehicle because on the method side, it involves engaging in austerity, such as like giving away your own body, giving up your own head, and so forth. And those kinds of great austerities are unbearable. That's not something that someone could possibly do. And on the kind of wisdom side, this profound is difficult to understand. So they are looking at the teachings on emptiness and misunderstanding that, thinking that, well, if you teach that nothing, they understand emptiness to mean sort of like there's nothing whatsoever, that it's extremely difficult to understand. And some fall into the extreme of nihilism, thinking that there's nothing whatsoever. So some say that these teachings of the Mahayana are not the speech of the Buddha. They're only something that was sort of made up by Nagarjuna and so forth. And both in terms of the method side that involves these unbearable, like difficult acts of generosity and so forth, as well as on the wisdom side and the difficulty of understanding emptiness, that it's right to have some kind of animosity toward the great vehicle.
뭐야, 뭐지? 다들 싸워디용도 두기 세셔 왔어. 두 나처럼 준이야 텔레메들레 두 테니야 신다 자에 탑시체도와 두기 두는 세자와 지들 매제 레셔서 매매 슝그날이야 근데 셰도 와서 거라 근데 동해 기자 미편바 서를 자와 지식에서 동해 도서 양바 예나야 고 현대 배 강의를 전부 만부지 세고고요나 단대 동해 충주 양군에 되고 서고래서 용초그래서 거라 동해 기자 미편바 서를 자와 지식에서 미편바데 동해 충주지 양에 되게 소설 템바 맹게데 다 세네 아니 더 전부터 요버때 제발 지식에게 어여 말해서 거라 지식에서 뒤질랍나 뭐래
So,
야 어디
so
제발
then,
야 어디 다나시
건강해. Um, So here then in verse 372, it says, physicians say that poison may be eliminated with poison. So how is it contradictory to say that suffering may eliminate something unhelpful? So here there are some illnesses where like for example, there are certain sort of toxins within the body, and that can be eliminated through ingesting something that is poisonous or toxic. And so too, when it comes to then, as a physician might treat such an illness with something that is poisonous, so too, by enduring a little bit of suffering, it is possible to eliminate a great deal of suffering. And so therefore, it's logical to endure that little bit of suffering in order to eliminate something that is much greater.
야 제발 로네 들어가 다 텔레야 나서 집에 두고 시오라 두디서도 텔레하고 나서 집이라 강해요라 이나야 집에 동에 집에 뒤에서 시에 년가 유배 내 그때 봐서 저기나 두이나고 따는 이거 그래서라 두네 세월셔와 지들 매제를 셔바신도 네 중요 동에 기자 마음배 네펜바 전부 세월 기바 지식에 대다르바 코나오세 어들 따땅마다 집버시도 뒤뒤실럽나라서
So here, just to read the little commentary to this, it says that just in the same way that by some kind of poison that would give rise to a temporary kind of sickness, right? If we have to take something that is toxic, it might create some bit of suffering within the body. But if that is able to dispel the kind of poison that would generate the suffering of death, then that is something that should readily be taken. And so too, in order to, why would it be contradictory to endure a little bit of suffering in order to dispel a greater suffering or something that is very unbeneficial in the future? It's only logical to do so.
뭐야 다 동해세제라 다음 미리 봐서스도와 어디 다 어디 가서도 최남건도 인조 신세 이니 조시 뭐라 이니 조시 작배세 동해 기자 팬이게 팬버시바 지미 배서 어디 다 가서도서는 최남건도 인조 신세 그 자와 컨디션이나 소소 삼로 공로 때문에 량도 고요라 최남건도 인조 신세 이때 가서도서는 이 교회 끝내랑배 류가길래 개원주 그랬어라. 아니 그런데 미교와지 이시요나 때 류가길래 때 미교와주도 그랬어. 자초는 것도 그런데 계신 버렸어. 그런 게미기 그런랑배 와게니 소소 차와데 게미기래도 그랬어 거라. 초는 것도 기디지 초는 영원도 아니 그런 개와다 미교와던 것도 그랬어. 대왕게니 자와 상이 차별해서 최남건도 인도시 이내 조시라지 샘도 조어래서 와 습글론 교환게네 개미긴 좋기도 아마 보시 동해 계자 팽이게 템버시 바심버시 동해 계야 겁리 동해 또 그냥 보이나야 되게야 템버 용교래서 뒤에 그 동해 중 당둘라는 서버시나 뒤에 저기 어래서 뭐라 동해 계자 팽배 이게 템버시바 chi me pense o de te da bu de pendo yung gra tende ya o tende jo ta so de so de wo de ba te yi ke ve ko ne la na lu nga ge le ke wa ju shin ane chö nam go do yin zhuo xin te ba xin bi do le yi ne zuo xie zhao zhao bei xiang ju sen bei jie ba xiang ju sen bei ga jie ji dong ye ji yang xian la pen ba de bei yi ji pen ba xia wa ji na ga xie pen ba xie ba xie mi pen ba ju de xie o ti ko long gi wang ge pen ba ju re xie ta ti wo de ya ka xie do xie na ju de xie penan de xie do 따로 다 세고 생각들에 지 커버했는데 자야다 니만에 매자야다 된대요라 아니야 매일 자네 매자야 된대요 다른 사람들 샵주 전부 제도가 어딘데 소리 샵고 왔다 제발 소보 봐서 샤네 제니 스타 제도가 아니 따로다 세고라 소고 다다 메테야서 단다고 샵주 제도 때부터 말아 다네 대상들 시다 하고 먹고 그래서 해도 뛰어보다 말다 니만에는 그 매자에 같은 데잖아 나서 연구라 메테야세 치치에서 펜버리 줘와 자리 나서 제만 펜도 전부 요즘 단도도서 깔려 유나한테 수업하고도 리나세 다다 신라 다다 신달라 대화다스 펜버 자신부 주르에 다대 동매초세 다다 신라 펜도 자신부 연구이나 대단달 동매초 주르 시텔라 때도 초조인데 수업하자 레그레스 때 동매초세 냠솔렘바 릭바테 지시메데세 미릭바요마레 레그레스 오라 릭바타시메데세 쉔데 디솜게 사게게 네루이나 야나 상부 루이노세 어디 타마데 디스토 아카시라 쉔데 나이 루이노세 나이 로스레스네다 진데트니 로스요레 티 샤나 디그레스도 야 디스 주나
Mm. So here then in the next two verses, it establishes that although there's a little bit of suffering in the kind of austerities or the deeds of the great vehicle, it's not right to despise what is going to completely eliminate suffering. So here it says in verse 373, the scriptures maintain the mind is prerequisite for all dharmas. The mind is the principal factor in karma. So if one does something helpful with the intention to be helpful, how could it be unhelpful even if suffering is involved? So here, whatever action we engage in is preceded by our intention. And so if the mind is virtuous, the actions of our speech and body will be virtuous as well. If our mind is non-virtuous, then our actions of body and speech will be non-virtuous as well. So in terms of our actions, positive and negative actions, the mind is primary. This is something that is the principal factor in terms of what determines the outcome of those actions. And so here it says, again, that prior to all dharmas or all things comes the mind. And particularly from the Mahayana Sutras, it teaches that it is proclaimed that the mind is principle. And so here it is the case that there's a little bit of suffering involved in the kinds of deeds of a bodhisattva. But if those are done with a mind wishing to benefit others, then how could it be that they not bring about benefit, right? These are done with this positive kind of intention. And if intention is really what brings about the results, then here, how could this not be beneficial? And then continuing into verse 374, if one does something something unpleasant that will later be helpful, then what about doing something for oneself and for others that is both pleasant and helpful? This is an ancient principle. So here, like for example, in our modern medicine, we could talk about things like actually undergoing major surgery and so forth. But in prior medical systems, you might have done something like letting out blood or burning of some kind. And those sorts of actions or those sorts of things involve a little bit of temporary present unhappiness, right? But they bring about a greater benefit in the end. By doing those kinds of painful procedures, we are actually bringing about benefit. And so here, if it is the case that one needs to, then what need is there to speak about doing something that involves a little bit of suffering, but is actually in the present, but is going to bring about a great benefit for oneself and others? So to endure a temporary bit of suffering in order to bring about a great benefit, that's logical, that's right. And this is something that has been, is the system of all of the Buddhas of the three times. And it's a really sort of the greatest kind of beneficial system we can talk about.
Oh yeah. 다 숨바셔야 되는데 이때도 대화 첨부치도 배리지 총을 잡아면 잤어. 다 첨부치 주에 있는 대충 강에 도서 여버들 차네. 대용매도 something 삼교 말에서 했던다래도. 대화 첨부 시도로 첨부들로 다지. 도서 강에 도서 some 전에 총을 잡아면 잤어. 근데 샤주를 제 결혼 그리스 당가 지금에서는 샤주제 그 텔레마가네 소소 뭐시 제 대화 전부 영화에 들는 게는 되게 말아 어딘데서 대가르스도스네 게데 대충 용당에서 게데 대화 전주지 발로 다네 단데 강에 도서 중에 있나야세 대화 자신 톱교나서 텔레테네 대화 자신 부톱교 요나서 와라 근데 때베 대화 용 스틸러로 때베 대중 때베 대화 대중 대화 중 스틸러서 알아 대조서 네 대화 중 당화를 줘서 다 대화 전부들이야 마음과 영화에 삼을다네 동의 충족지 류를 강의를 진행 연구나 진양 딜러다네 서버셔버리시가 대가르스나 게테 대화 충을 요소 땅에 대화 자신부 통한 주나서 대화 자신부 도구요나 근데 자주 semba 템베스 셈템베 거네라 대화 방식 대화 충의 방식 자체에 라다 셴리야 셴줄이야 아니 타르베 대화 중화 시글라서 대화 충 대화 충 대화 충 여배 대화 좀 당화서 다던다 대화 충의 신비 라샤를 펜도 신부 주고는 대시도 대화 충 땅에 강의를 또 주나 대셔 봐서 그래서 뭐 되실라냐
So here, then the next verse is under the third subheading here, which is that for the sake of a great bliss, it's not right to be sort of attached to a little bit of pleasure, to smaller kinds of pleasures. And so here it says in 375, if one will later attain great happiness from forsaking some trivial pleasure now, then a sensible person, realizing that she will gain great happiness, should abandon that trifling pleasure now. So here, we shouldn't get caught up on like the little bit of suffering that one might have to endure in order for there to be a greater kind of a benefit. Like if you have to undergo some kind of a surgery, and you think, well, I don't want to deal with that kind of suffering, but that little bit of suffering will say bring you the great bliss of like not dying. It would be worth it to engage in that. It would be worth it to endure that little bit of pain now for the sake of something that will be greater in the future, a greater pleasure in the future. And so, therefore, sort of giving up little, smaller, trifling pleasures in order to seeing that there will be a much greater benefit that comes in the future. Bodhisattvas, who are really like steadfast, who are stable, forsake that smaller pleasure in order to seeing that it will bring about the pleasure of liberation in the minds of self and others, something that is much more vast. And so, therefore, they don't sort of get attached to small, trifling pleasures. They see that those are just mere sort of passing things and should abandon that for the sake of something greater.
Oh, yeah. Don't do it. Get the damn mission as well. The watching but to you now. Gangi Chunju, you know, there's so much of Nasigora. Get the damn mission. Then a member dog in Nese, I'm Jitazora. Member to Zoge. When a mission man is changing, but not a try to main mission bar. Not a try to Sunday Nation sober. Make a sober, Kabjala sober to Sura, Tos Kalete. Oh, mission man is changing. And some jur, then a maesa, or dead Jimare, or Titawa, the Mantabulos. Get it, they were champion to Tewa Chunguta and Mesonasa. Then ne shive, Tando, member tagi, me mishimba, so Shimber Shiba, they are miracle tagresura. No, down Vignasi, Chumutan to Che, Metan 송바이노 대화 첨부터 했던다라 대화 청우디 차년데 대화 첨부디 러당주 말레스 야 된디도 와
So then in the next verse, it reads, "If you cannot bear this, then healers and such who prescribe bitter medicine would disappear, and that makes no sense." So in order to cure our diseases, sometimes doctors will prescribe medicine that is bitter, or like in doing surgery, or some sort of needling, acupuncture, moxibustion, and so forth, things that are in the short term involve a little bit of suffering. But in order to gain a greater benefit, one is willing to endure those, or it's logical that one should endure those. And so here it says again in this that for the sake of a greater pleasure, one should be able to bear sort of losing or giving up a smaller pleasure. Because by that, like a doctor, for example, who prescribes a medicine that really isn't pleasant, that is going to bring about a greater good. And so therefore one shouldn't get caught on the smaller kind of pleasure. Therefore it's not logical or right that one should feel kind of animosity towards this, but rather that one shouldn't give up the greater good for the sake of something smaller.
oh the tamade chimjurtene temayse te samara tamayse chimbeto chimbeto lutane chungli chana digmares lutangi amares atandare to ya tisilona
So yeah, so here there might be a spelling mistake in one of those verses, but really it just comes down to that it's not logical to feel sort of animosity, that one shouldn't, for the sake of something smaller, give up something that is greater, like mentally relinquish that greater for the sake of something smaller.
oyata never juba kaite lalar kebe pembartos tanda negam negi yuna kange yuna te pulia pemba yene te cheba te kebe lo de sembera never juba kaite lalar kebe pembartos kabla la ya te neje yuna te maumbalia seba chena pendo chimbu yona te de ore sewara oh te kandere sena wala te kare ore disha for shaya simje membe ngor never juba kayamba te ta chanju sambar chini ako chimbata ka chini ko chidan nebe ringina chanju sambar nebe ke churbi amara kawe sto shinto ne chupa tinde ke sigisir shaya simje membe ngor never juba kayamba te chanju simbe cheba chebe tiso 라라를 케베 페벌 통해서 동해 중세 잠기 때도 대화 전부 냠발 메자고서 강에 춘주실 때문에 대화 전부 주에 된 냠주 요모에서 걸레 잡고 그래서 했단 말이야. 서가 잡고 그래서 강에 돼. 동해 돼. 다 들려 거기 동과 구도 하나 오늘 동해 기랑시 탐제도 뻔버셔 시 송바다 결로시네 그런 단데 동해에 대고 그래서 고 동해지랑 시리에서 동해지랑 시리 동해 탐지대 대고래 뒤다달에 타로 토고래 근데 시대도 되가래시고라 동해 탐지대 대고 말베서 동해양 당동랑고 도와서 그래 신나서라 오늘 동해지랑 시입에 탐지도 뻥버셔 시 송바단 갤로스나 대단 개그를 내줘라 일단 미기 세와 다세 대주단에 그러나스 지단데 조금마다 암믹셀이었는데 고 초보인데 소야 대단주 슝심 상면을 용기 어디서 거라 지단 조금마다 암믹셀 것을 초보를 요라 지단 미기 세와 다세 대주단에 그러나스 지단라스 대다 예매께서 근데 지단이야 맞죠 근데 이나야 암믹셀 것이야 초보 나와나야 요라 어떻게 그라 지단 대다 예매게 미게 세나 자주 sem바 코아를 내봐 라셰콜라 대 교바시노 자주 sem바 코아내는 심장에 돈도 제가 코란 가르치기는 심장을 팬베톤 바시치 그래서 내가 코란을 내고 유나고 내배 제삼네 디 로다니 전부터 봐도 지금 말해서 질다와 미게 세와 난가시래 지단 나와요 나야 깝깝을 깝고요 지단 깝고요 깝깝이야 나와요 게래 근데 용해요도 대전에 끌랑 앞에 지단 미기 저 지단다 미세 돌려 개발하고 그래서 지단 미소든데 미세 초거든데 쓰기와라 어디서 교나야 그래서
So here, then coming in the next verse, the first half of which says, "The wise see that in some cases, what is usually harmful can be helpful." So this is the way of someone who is skilled. They recognize that although in the short term something might be difficult, but if they see that there is a longer term benefit, then they would engage in that. And so here, bodhisattvas who are able to see the kind of greater good, even if something might seem like it is harmful to the sort of perspective of those lesser sentient beings. When bodhisattvas are engaging in their various activities, some of them who are skilled, right, seeing that there is a benefit, just for the sake of a little bit of suffering, or even though there might be a little bit of suffering involved, they don't allow that to degenerate their great joy. And so really, when it comes to bodhisattvas, when they engage in these kinds of practices, although there might be a little bit of difficulty involved or a little bit of suffering, it's really, we need to make an effort to bear with that because we recognize that there's a greater benefit that comes about. And so here, following that first half, there's kind of a sort of doubt that arises. But someone says, well, if it's the case that everything is in the nature of suffering, then isn't that all to be abandoned? Like we talked about how these lower realms, and in particular, all of samsara is in the nature of suffering. And so isn't that all something that is to be gotten rid of? Doesn't that then contradict the scriptures? Now, here in the second half, it says, says, all treaties propose both general rules and exceptions. So when it comes to, in general, although something might be prohibited by the Buddha, we should recognize that there are special sort of cases in which that would be allowed. And those who are skilled in means, bodhisattvas abide in samsara solely for the cause of bringing happiness to all, self and others. And so although it is the case that things in general might be, say, prohibited or prescribed by the Buddha, one should recognize that there are differences in terms of the sort of generalities and specific particular circumstances. So it might be the case that in general something is disallowed. However, a bodhisattva with their skill and means could see that a little bit of sort of suffering or pain for someone is going to bring about a greater benefit, and thereby they would do what is normally prohibited, or they might be prescribed to do things and so forth. So one needs to be skilled at understanding the kind of particular circumstances and distinguishing that from the general kinds of rules.
뭐야, 다들이다 솔로가 뒤집던 게 택바 전부 강실래서도 택바 전부도 강실래서라 니징은 다 줘봐 군세 니지징도 땅에 권내네 줘봐 바로 집어 졸라서부터 쉬어라 어제 참아 이시쯤만 메셔 되다 이시쯤만 메셔봐 동반이 또 베시 주만 베시 시에바 되소서라 세미 수시 때라 메서 삼단 덴바시네 tel야 그 메주요 말에서라 뒤야보면 들었어 내가 땅요 말에서 거라 진짜 봐가지고 대발 침뱉더니 강실에 심지어 탐제 동해다 전대 진행정원도 땅에 전주 선배 저봐 용소 저봐 근당하셔라 내 동반이 또배 시티만 해봐 저버를 쉐봐라 아니 세미 시럽진 수시 때라 매 메리테스 매시 매바 메리셔라 라나 메베 장주 토베 톱 저버를 tella tengi tekpa membe tenu le maden be sis tekpa membe tenu ko suma sumbe rawa ne tile lagbe chanju sembe tenu le sumba re se rawa tiswana.
So then next in verse 378, it says, the universal vehicle says that all activities should be motivated by compassion, and that wisdom will make them pure, or this kind of pure wisdom, the wisdom realizing emptiness, makes them pure activities. And so therefore, what sensible person would deride this? So here, as it is explained within the scriptures of the universal vehicle or the great vehicle, that bodhisattvas, all of the kinds of activities that they perfect of a bodhisattva are preceded by this kind of compassion that wishes to free all sentient beings from suffering, and is also accompanied by this perfected pure wisdom realizing emptiness. And so with those two components, who with a mind who is sensible would deride those this great vehicle. And so here this is something that is only taught completely within the great vehicle scriptures. This method that completely to obtain enlightenment, highest enlightenment, is something that is taught completely within the greater vehicle teachings, but is not taught within those of the lesser vehicle. Nga ba di dunchudo do gu do gu
야, 땡구라. 어디서? 야, 어디서? 또 어디지 셔나 오메가. 또 담마들 단다 가르쳐도스나. 우땅어라 소건 고침바땅어라 소바 뜻을 야구면 두시라라. 근데 동반이들 꼭하고를 뒤 체다르치를 슬랍거라. 년도 때가 가시거라. 뒤에 가서 신바땅에 대고 고침바땅에 대시 남바 참마 땅그밖에 시여 말아. 전주섬 깨네 전주섬 앞에 로야 가진 장사게 류를 처마다 빌로 깨게시기도. 류리야 그 처마다 빌로 깨마도 고 신자를 산기요 말아. 아티인데 고 침바땅에 섬디 숙섬비도 콜 펜도지나 류 침바땅에 갈 펜도기네 섬 가시 또시도네 당기를 마도 텔 초아 동에 용구요 말아. 미섬세드 베티 닝두 첨부레도 섬기 섬을 땅디 다르르지 겹제 마 겹디 가시 저거네 그만 섬 마루네 단다 마신데 나다 메네 고가 제구 신동해요래 그 콘도게 시기네 도도 가지 어디인데 그 잡아다 닝지 그때 telleja 나서도 시기네 도라 tinderechen ko lula chama ta be lo ke wa so tinde ka ta ko ma do nang ba chang ma chanju sim ke ba chang ma ta ko be ke mara chanju sim be je chang ma ta ko be ke mara kire o ti chilana.
So here, just to give a summary of what's come above, there are those who sort of deride or have animosity toward the great vehicle, saying, well, you're advocating for things like giving away your body, your head even. That's something that's not good. And so too, these teachings on emptiness really are going to lead to a kind of nihilism in which one doesn't believe in anything. And so here, it's necessary to understand that the kinds of teachings about giving away the body are not for all bodhisattvas, but rather it is for those who, having generated a bodhicitta, having developed a kind of resolve and strength of mind, are able to view their own body and giving away their own body like they would giving away a vegetable. They're able to engage in such practices without any kind of pain and suffering, but rather do so joyfully. And so we can see this is when one is so much like kind of overpowered by one's bodhicitta, you are able to engage in such acts without suffering, but do so joyfully. Sort of the way in which someone who is fighting in a war, for example, their anger can kind of overpower the suffering that they are experiencing. They might have many wounds to their body and be really in terrible shape, but they keep fighting and fighting because of that anger that sort of suppresses their thoughts of their own pain. And so this is something that isn't being advocated for all bodhisattvas or for everyone who is pursuing that path, but rather those who have reached a certain level of development are able to do so joyfully.
동반이 있어야 되네. 꾸준매가 꼭하고 꼬나고 최다 연결이 줄 거라. 어디에 미망셔 전에 성게요라. 동반이 있어도 가면도 시시도 랑신게 동바를 랑원에 동바를 시시 매배 소리 시거라. 야한테는 딱바를 떼지를 봐주면서도 자체 탐지 롱아를 다시야. 지여가 제시하고도. 세티지도 그 가시기 당분에 간거 매서잖아. 동바야 가시기 전에 거라. 뒤가 어디서 여해도 여해대로 건 레드 이렇게 말세. 하여튼 세요래. 뒤에는 동바세도 간거 매서. 아니 뒤 최다 longo라. 소소 섬리안에 레좀데다 뜻을 싸움에 붙여거라. 담부 기부 총국을 값을 레좀데 계시 개버셔야 돼. 뒤도다 예송도 와. 제 때지 레버리 좀 알이야. 자체 상마 롱하대. 교계 레버 때와 좀 교미게 레버 동에 좀 롱하대 하고에 템보 하고에 된다를 레좀데 기부 총국 겁네. 뒤 삼루티 템보 차고요라. 근데 그 동반이 시에서는 레좀데 다시 대절이야. 내가 제 마음에 지고요라. 근데 가서 동반에서도 남중 알아서 선반하신테 말해서 그거라. 다들 매로 말을 다 여당들 로가지 요래서 그런 남중 아주 선반하시 말해서 들 로스 다요를 로 여당들 들으래서 다 매나니 도안용게 동행용게 매로. 아니 레준데 매라. 아니 냐와이 다터도 동에 Nungay mayari ti chabada nyingi tsawato dagas karsura. Tunara chemada ngune membesu chadora. O jindu karsura. Tongba nyesidu namji gansu samlu nala rawantu chubari samlu kogoda. Sokudan, semdan, soadan, dushidan kanga la tene ani chik dagi ngo chubkuwa ke samgimedwa. Tanda gansu mirwa, mi dagi ngo chubdi. Teso kanga la teshin relni mi chagura. Tende mebacha. Gansu samlu da dingi soburi semde se sosu dadi. Kunzu la madrini chik rawantu yubari samlu kogoda. Namji samlu kogoda. Ngo ti yoma resi wara. Rawantu chupa, rangshi chupa. Ane mayari wasi maya marese. Pumbuga la teni paa le chi tagi duwasi. Tichi, tashi, tudubi, kangbayi chi tagi duwasi. Kora mayingi chasha mambuchi la techi rin teni paa tashi duwasi. O tagi yoko tichi udresi wara. Teni tagba ti yota ti resi. Teni tagba chamchi yoko chigu wara, yorwa. O tila teni soku nasu na nagi sayarab chira. Semba kiwu mayani kiwu mendu kiwu du sayarwa. Khunzu chawache kanga susu taga chawache wala shaante taate sobuwa mayinge seme mayinge loga chagawara demin duchi sigra peche na sana ko darshi tala sobu yawara su yawara kuwara sheba kuwara suwa dushi kanga teso le tene pata yawara ko su rwesne mara sheba rwesne mara ngobu saba sibu machi kasa demin duchi sushi kanga mayinbe duchi chagadwa sa ko ti sobo li chi tubu chun naso na nagi seti shaa tubu yara. Hoti ti samla ko ura. Ya hoti chi lap chi na ya taas.
So then when it comes to emptiness, wherein the criticism is that, well, emptiness is really sort of difficult to understand, and it leads to a kind of nihilistic view in which one denies the functioning of karma, cause and effect. And so here one needs to understand that by refuting there being some kind of inherently existent I, or there's no sort of objective, autonomous, inherent existence, but that doesn't mean that nothing is existent whatsoever. One needs to understand how things actually do exist, that within phenomena that are dependently originated, all actions are viable, are suitable or logical. And so here, this kind of understanding of emptiness is something that needs to be approached in the proper kind of a way, wherein one has a foundation of a certainty in karma, cause and effect, and recognizes as well that a phenomenon like the self, the I, doesn't exist in the way that we normally think of it. But to just assert that, there's no self, and that there's no experience of suffering or happiness, there's no karma, cause and effect, that's kind of a wrong way of approaching this. It isn't negating existence altogether, but rather a particular way of existing. And so we normally think of there being like an I that is somehow autonomous, independent of the various sort of like, we think of my body and my mind and so forth, as if it had this kind of existence in and of itself. And so when one talks about emptiness, this is really a recognition that there is no such I that exists in the way that we perceive it to, that we think it exists in and of itself. But that doesn't mean that such an I is utterly non-existent, but rather it is something that is merely dependently designated upon a collection of parts, none of which is that actual thing. So we can talk about like, oh, there's Tashi or there's Tundru based upon seeing their aggregates and so forth. But it's not as though when we search for that, we can point to and find the thing that is that. And so here, when we are looking at the way in which the self exists, This is something that it doesn't exist, again, in the way that we have perceived it as having this kind of autonomous, independent existence. But some assert that the self is something which is a non-associated compositional factor, as in it's not associated with either mind or matter, but is something that is a mere kind of designation that exists in a way in which, again, there's a collection of parts, and although it feels to us as though there is something separate and apart from, like our aggregate of form and feeling and consciousness and so forth that exists as this self, it is something that is merely dependently designated. And within that kind of dependently designated existence, it is able to have experiences of happiness and suffering and so forth. And so having the kind of contemplation of the being of a small scope, for example, and gaining certainty in karma, cause and effect is an important kind of prerequisite to being introduced to emptiness in such a way as it doesn't undermine the viability of actions and results, and it doesn't therefore fall into a kind of extreme of nihilism.
Oh, yeah, that is. Oh, that is about. Ten to us, Tangmal share to read was something of it. Oh, yeah. Tashindo Geshe Rab Sabla, Kilu Tani, Machang Bess, Tatama de Tekpachambu, got to Sanje Kamari, Tekpachambu share, tapped and you got Yawame do tapped it Chimbata, Savan Gota, so she left the net when you said to Okabuta Cheta, Resha Sambiora, or Tita, don't that so tune shed Edo. No, but turn to the side. Shindo Jachi, Rab Sabla, Kilu Tani, Shindo Jachi Sigora. Chanju Sembe Choba Shindu Kacho Tabda Shiram Nigaro, Tenikas, Chanju Sembe Choba Shindu Kachambo, Nelu Rabdu Sabo, Tombani Tantelasora, Choba Shindu Kachambo, Roa, and Shirab to Tawa to Shindu Sabo, Shindu Kachi Rab Sablasa, Kilu Danisa, Kilu Netiko Yavuja Makonge, Sososhin and Davachi Yavuja. Subsociation Chandu Menge, they are women do some tambunine, a kilo tengera. Kilo tani machambe, telechangi machambe. And the culture said, Tasha Tranam, Mumbai is a da shen said, da shen said, and Chanju Sembe Sevashin to Kachambo, da Nelu to turn rub to Saba, Nivutela Sera, and the Kasura, rub to Saba. Meva Samji Tanes, oh, teach Resa, oh, some time for a tambu in a tane, that you shall go. So like Kilus in it, tambu in a patane, tane, Kiluches, Telco, some lieutenant and substitute when I carry to Tandukur Chimara. Tani Moya, Tebachimbu, Tanela, Machang Besera. Kilu Tani Machang Besser. Moya, Tebachimbu, Tanel Chamanure. Tanda tozo tudu sa ane lo ta kigra primare sira. Machambe. Oh, kosu so. Machambe kuan de barcheva tenesi wara. Machambe takshen tranam mongba yeshe swa. Taada shengi trapyu du chunga yinla se. O di sosolia machambe che tila kuwa tamdo soso tra shenla tra kyan chigre se. Ti nore re si wara. Dakshen Tranam Basir, Dakshen Tranam Mongba Yesa, Shenye, and the Kasra Tra, Putuchuan Yesa. Soso Tra, Shengi Tra, Shen Lana Shengi Tra, Dugara, Soso Pongba Shengete, Soso never can get the Resura, Trasidation. Dada Shengi, Tra Putuchuan Yelase, Teta Tranam Mongba Ye, Tada, Dina. Chekwa chembula mebar chido, o tinde kansa de, karangi ma chisam tele meba mershe tangbu nine, sabso se samlo matange, tabdan shiram niga kyachimbu tinde kundu machinge, o tezo tene tekwa chembu, tima rese, yabu ma rese, sanje kama rese, mongbe o tinde chigyo rese, tinde labgyo rese ura. Tene tekwa symbol me parche to tekwa symbol me parche ge kasa tende sire so wara. Oh, we are teaching them.
So then in the next verse 379 comes a kind of summary of the meaning here that says, discouraged by its vastness and profundity, ignorant persons, due to their confusion, today deride the universal vehicle and thus become the foes of themselves and others. So here, those that assert again, discouraged by its vastness and profundity. So both in terms of the method side, they are saying they're looking at the universal vehicle or the Mahayana as not being the speech of the Buddha. They think that, oh, these kinds of austerities or practices of the method side are too extreme. They're no good. And so too, the wisdom side in the teachings of emptiness fall into an extreme of nihilism. And so when they view this from the start, they think that this is something that is bad. Just merely hearing about the kinds of vast activities of bodhisattvas and the profound meaning of the mode of abiding of phenomena, they have a kind of a fear. And those sort of ignorant persons, not really actually having learned the scriptures of the great vehicle or the universal vehicle, disparage that. They are sort of deride that universal vehicle or the scriptures of the Mahayana. This is right from the beginning, just sort of having heard about it, they feel a kind of fear based upon most likely their assumptions about it. And then due to that, they disparage the universal vehicle. And really, this is the sort of supreme, the greatest enemy of one's self and others. This is something that is quite a big mistake, as in it's going to bring about harm to you and others if you explain that to them or tell them, oh yeah, this isn't good. It's going to bring ruin to you. And so those sort of enemies like that, out of their ignorance, then deride this universal vehicle. They look at it and they say, this isn't something that is good. So they're really in a position where they're not ready to hear this, or they're not able to sort of understand it, and thereby come to have this kind of enmity towards it, which in turn brings ruin to themselves and others. They're not really ready to hear this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dear, Kasura. Tiba Chimbo Chida Kamara said, Tiba Chimbo Sanjay Kamara said, Chida go Tiba Chimbo to Yonda, the song you Samara. Yonda, the poet, the Bashi Sumbanashi, Tendisha Chida Mitama, the song is Samara. Oh, Tikara Sinako. Tinsada Jinetako Karina shed the gra. Dogbe Shanchiba, Gochibatam, Karashena, Chego something or some Shako Madua. Tangimbe to settle the Chichago sometimes you saw. Tend to commit Chida meet Samalia, Dogbe Shanchiba, Chegosena. Socialization that love Chegosena, no, don't water. Kagashenico, and Dochi Gumara, Tashena. Das Drumgeschön durch Schäne, den Sand, Chineko, Schäne, Kayomar, Nimm bitte Koti, den Ramada, und die Indikator. Tebachembo Saja Summa, Chitako, Yondaja Sungu Samara, Sanga, to Chibara, Tebachembo Saga. Teacher Sanja Chumde Chile, I remember Mambo Sumete, Gobam Chimbodoa, teacher Koraga, Lord Sambachi Nega, Chitako Tatu Tel Sama Tangura. Sungurwa piju chewte mara tanda ko tambo koran lo chege ni chetuya yo marwa tantuya mara zu pu chunju de ke je sande ne zu kanga khashe sabutin de ke je she ko chen ko she se ke yo mara ha ku mara oti inde ko tu je kamda samba palanye chitawa shindu kingi yuza ande tela ko te tanda she ne de mu ko generation ko chöre ba mabu yukudo. Ta tensa de pajo kamda samba da bala ne ke shengo mara. Da she ju za sama she tanda she ni hundan so ani ta kar she ko ne samsa. Jondo atinde do wa. O ti so da kar she. Ki wange. Yo da she ma so she. 주제배 기부 총무단 정다 시부터 야구 컨디션에 로 내가 세드배 만지마까지 시상게 로 소수직부서 도마면에 검되지 알아 때까지 뭐 시상게 되는 시네 다 다고 시다 세지 숙식부시나 아니지 또 자체 나와줘야 차거라 어디 내가 무슨 거 있어라 어디 질러치나 다
So here again, there are those who say that the Mahayana or the universal vehicle teachings is not the speech of the Buddha. Now, this we can say was not taught as widely. It wasn't like the sort of turning of the wheel of the Four Noble Truths. It was taught widely, but rather this is something that was taught only to those who would be able to understand it. Now, these days, we sort of teach whatever. There's maybe a sense that the Dharma is going to be exhausted, or there's a kind of feeling that whatever one knows should be taught. But this, again, is sort of a different kind of time. The Buddha, during his time, didn't teach it widely. This is the same with the secret Mantrayana. It wasn't something that he taught except for to those whose mental acuity accorded with the kind of teachings of the Buddha. So it's like if you have a really little kid and you try to explain something really profound to them, they're not going to be able to understand that. They're not going to get what it is that you're trying to say. And so too, the Buddha, knowing the kind of dispositions, the kind of inclinations, proclivities of various sentient beings, taught in accordance with that. And so some who are ready for, who are suitable disciples for the universal vehicle or the Mahayana, he taught this towards them. But, it's not like sort of the way that we are today, where whatever it is we teach about the Mahayana quite widely, regardless of whether it's something that people are ready for or not. But when there are those who can see that, well, it is the case that since beginningless time, my grasping at an I, my sort of self-centeredness and self-cherishing is really the source of all of my problems, and that by exchanging that for a focus on other sentient beings, this would really bring about the highest happiness. There are those that are really ready for the teaching on the Mahayana. But here we should recognize that although the Buddha did not teach the Mahayana widely at that time, that doesn't mean that it was not the speech of the Buddha.
야, 다들 다니바 대과 침뱉더니 까르투바 시다 산지 좀 된데 송배 대과 침뱉던데 산지 까르에서 어떤 년들 대과 가실 주고 알아 이바 대과 침뱉더니 까르투바라 숨세 퍼신지 쩌바때 봐서 파르도 침뱉 쩌바때 봐서 전선에서 전주 선배 남 조바들로 시작해봐 대과 침뱉더니 그랬더니 전주 선배 남 조바들 때렸더니 시작을 와라 근데 산지에 치외 땅이 들에 조바시고 산지에 치와 또 대과 침뱉 남냠솔은 상제배 남가시고 그 산지에 치외 연대 주게 버셔 산지에 땅이 들에 조바시고 배 까르 주바오세 다당 못들 숨도 다디 뭐지 벌써 당부들에 다 가르쳤으나 티신제 때문에 라 아니 니셰 중세 잠에 봐서 특별신분 도나리아 껴여봐 껴여배 셰바시 요마를 스탑도 싫어 가게 잘해야 껴여배 셰바 요마를 싫어 이 당부들에도 특별신분 대바신부 telestemba 대바신부 요스토바데 대바신부 나 땡겨라 땡메테나 땡겨마라 테네 테니 테니 까투보 제선자 테니 테니 빼 게신부르 제선 사게 가르스티 투거라 다 담부들이다 담부 가르스나 티신지 테네라 니바 중세게 니셰 껴여버 지나 셰바 참마 탑다 싫어 관계선에 껴매버려 뭐도 뒤가 껴여게 셰셰바 중세계 요마레스 어디 당부들에도 당부 내에서 진단 주점 서준주사 삼대시럽 미지다사 당부가시 진바시 주점시 서버다가 직시도 걔네 준주시 삼대 준주 삼대 시럽시 인지다 인지다 티신 특징이나 대시를 내가 니시 지시였어. 어다니 바셔버지 마시 안타부 장시어르스므로. 다 가르치도스는 진다 추점세 단데 가래 특징이 되네 되니래 니시기 차중세 지냐 매세 매바때 바로와 나다 못 진바다 추점 서바 준주 삼대 시럽들이 쥐바 바로도 진바 주다스 지단테나 벌진 주디 시기거래서 되네 쉐베데 셈게다 벌진 주들로 로야게 땡데 당부 장주서도 셈게 오래서라 대한 년도지 장주 랑게 장주 들었어요 막 대바 신부 장주 셈게 오래서라 대바 신부 장주 셈 쉐베데 가서 쉐베데 셈게 봐서 대교닝지 당에 남 대바 신부님라서 대교닝지 당에 당에 남 대바 신부님라서 다 대교시 송사르도 닝지를 송거라 대 조바를 대바 신부 때문에 상계지 송배 치료셔라 다 당부들도 가시라 신다 주름 수준주 삼대시럽 벌써 주시라 근데 인지다 주신 대시 대과 전부들 시에서 근데 뒤져가 대라니 시 지시요데 니바 셰바티나 셰제테솔라 니바 셰바 지시요데 중세견면도 매서 거라 대과 신부들래 상계 송배치로 야 뒤질라나
So then next, we have establishing that the scriptures of the universal vehicle are the speech of the Buddha. And this comes in various sub-topics. Here, beginning with kind of its teaching of the six perfections. And then secondly, the necessity of knowing the complete path of great enlightenment from the scriptures of the universal vehicle. And then the need to know the great nature of a Buddha from the universal vehicle scriptures, which is therefore then the word of the Buddha. And so here, the first of these teaching of the practices of the six perfections then comes in three parts, which is first that there's not the slightest bad explanation in these scriptures of the Mahayana. So coming in verse 380, it says, "The nature of what the universal vehicle maintains is generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stability, wisdom, and compassion. How could it contain a wrong statement?" So here, this is really establishing that by teaching the six perfections, it is faultless with respect to both method and wisdom. Here, when it comes to the words that give an explanation of the scriptures of the universal vehicle, there's not the slightest fault that can be found in that. And the reason for that is, again, it teaches the six perfections: generosity and ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom, as well as the basis for those activities, generating the mind of enlightenment, the mind of awakening, and the cause for that, which is really the nature of great compassion. That is what is taught in these scriptures. And it is therefore the case that this teaches how to perfect that, or sort of bring it to its culmination, is taught in the scriptures of the universal vehicle, which of course is then taught by the Buddha. So here, when it comes to wishing for enlightenment or being able to perfect enlightenment. We're not talking about that of a Shravaka or a Pratyeka Buddha, but rather that of a Bodhisattva, full Buddhahood. And thereby, since this teaches all of the methods to be able to accomplish that, why would one then have animosity towards this or say that it's not the speech of the Buddha?
Oh, yeah. That did it. Oh, yeah, that did it. Liberty. God does not take what you bet in there. Yeah, take what you bet in there. And you say, you say, you may be doing so. That take what you bet in there. Take what you bet in there. Take what you bet in there. Somebody, I'm not so much to let you rest. This year, to Aniba. Take what you bet in so much to let you rest. Take what you bet in there. Oh, Niba Nisa. Sutum, I got a Chimbe, Shangi Tunsa. Sutum da Chimbe, Shangi de Sochin Chamber. Sutum da Shimba. Sutum de Shalia Soba, so Shigora. Chimba de Shal Pember to a so Shigora. Sutum Chimbe, the Chimba de or the Kashigora, Tisum Shalta. Something Chimba, Chuji Chimba, Mijibu Chimba, Chimba Chimba, Tinamam. Sutum Shimbe Shangi Tunsa. Shandun so the Shangi Tundu to a chicha. Chundu Sube Tangi Jesse. That tell a Chundu down Shandun to Bala, Chundu down Subache in it. And the Karesina Tangi Jesse. Tangi Lam Kone Konduya, Pealia, Tikogara. Chundu somewhere, Chimbata, Sutum La Sobati, Sham Dungi Chawatelia, Chundu Samgura. Chundu Samne Kokone Kondia Pegra. Chundu Sebase, the Sabatilla Mambo Yungura. To me, darling, the Sebase, Chulang Gasha, New Zealand Chimenya Besabase, to me, darling, the Chulang Yabasabe Sabase, or to the same. Chundu Sebe, Dangi Kese. Parts of my channel, two never chibble so Yungura, that is the Seba Cometa Magomna, Dangmati, Chimbata Chudumiti. Lam the Dugma, the Stion to a Masoda, Chimbata Chudum, Yamle, the Abuchi Ogoyana, Sabacom Guara. Sabamagum, and you are your mother. Oh, Tisoda. Chundu Sebe, Taniki is here. Some day she have Tarbetus. Some day the Shirap Tombanya Comede, around Tarbatoya, the Shensim Jetamje, Tarbatoya to the Litany Conguara. Some day she have Tarbetus. Teaching Tene, or Tiwachim Tondasu Tushana, or Tiresa, or Tikaderisana, Lakshi Susu, Lakshi Tor on the Chena, Sidim da Chimba, when they lead on Longe to Besse, and the negotiation Tandas, negotiation to the Sheda, or Raleigh to Toyota, Shangiton, Tora Chishigumbre. Nega Shangi Tada, Chundu da Soba, Nega Latene, Tangi Gitan Tubata, so Chitanda ko Shanti Mandugate Homar Taginako, Shanti to be charging so Rangachico at the soul of Stingamer. Some day down, Chirap Mijine, Shayanda Vertiban Dolas, some day they sit up with the Karchirasana, Chawanda, Sem Yambar. Shana, Yanda Bachita was in Shibayo. Sim Yamsha Shan, Tombani to the Seju Shan, Teliba, Yana Yanda Samata Aje, Gongina, to Nelu, Unity, Shendura. Tawa Samba Samjiko, Mobo Seven Shiton, Musumta Shiomara. Sim Yambar Shana, Yanda Bachita was in the Shiba Euro, Shesumbata. Tarbe Juin Bess, some day that Shiram Yuti, Tarbe Juin Bess. Tarbe Juin Bess. Passing to Butene, Tepashi Butene, Jutin, Tuba Yelase. They turn sooner, Tepashi Buten so, they took the Yamlichavina, 대과신배 돈다 송기어래 남슬라가 덤베 최송나 야스라 덤베 최송나 뒤진게 seksual 유로서 어디나 때문에 도대 단다도 소나니 대과신배 단데 랑게 송기어래 세나 야디시 그나 수바레 수바카레메시 유송아
Yeah. So here then next is that the aims of the universal vehicle are taught in the scriptures of the universal vehicle. So here this comes in 381, wherein it says that others' aims are achieved through generosity and ethical conduct, one's own through fortitude and joyous effort. Meditative stability and wisdom lead to liberation. This summarizes the universal vehicle teachings. So here, the kinds of meanings that are taught within the Mahayana or the universal vehicle are really the means by which one attains the goal of that. So here, when it comes to the teachings on generosity and ethical conduct, these are mainly for the benefit of others. They have the function of being able to benefit others. Although we can say as well, though, that nothing that is taught within the Mahayana is not for the benefit of others. But here specifically, ethical conduct and generosity. And we should remember that generosity includes multiple types, the kind of material generosity, giving freedom from fear, giving the Dharma, giving love, and so forth. All of these practices are really they are for the sake of being able to attain a higher rebirth and wealth and so forth, but really are for the benefit of others as well. And so too, sorry. So others' aims are achieved through generosity and ethical conduct. Again, generosity being focused on giving something to others, and our ethical conduct protecting others from harm and so forth. Although they bring about the kind of results of having wealth and having a good rebirth in the future. And then the practices of fortitude and joyous effort. And again, we have the kind of these are undertaken with the aim to be of benefit to others, but temporarily they benefit you as well, right? One achieves one's own aims in the sense of by practicing patience, the different kinds of patience, particularly those of having like the patience in the face of harm or willingly taking up suffering, having patience with respect to learning the Dharma or fortitude, I should say. This is going to help protect the kind of other virtues that we have accumulated through generosity and ethical conduct, thereby achieving one's own aim. And undertaking these activities with joyous effort helps one to pursue that own aim. Although, again, in general, all of the Mahayana practices, or those of the universal vehicle, are directed toward the benefit of others. In the short term, this is accomplishing our own aims. And here, those practices of meditative concentration and wisdom, really we should understand that by placing the mind in meditative equipoise and coming to know the way that things are, this then leads to the cause of liberation. And so, although, again, these are all practices undertaken for the benefit of others, they lead to these goals, lead to achieving liberation, achieving temporarily one's own aim and the aims of others. And so, therefore, when we think about these kinds of practices that are done, they comprise the entire path of the universal vehicle in these six perfections. And so by holding on to the meaning of those, one then grasps the meaning of the entire universal vehicle. And if one holds on to or sort of gets the meaning of the words that have been taught there, then one is holding using the words of the Mahayana. So again, the two later practices of meditative concentration and wisdom. Wisdom, again, is something that we have to develop through repeatedly familiarizing our mind to it by thinking about it and contemplating on it. It's not something that we can immediately see directly like we would see yellow or blue or something, but by taking up that path and cultivating it within our mind, it leads to the cause of liberation. And when combined with the other practices of generosity and ethical conduct, fortitude and joyous effort, meditative concentration, that leads to the achievement of full enlightenment. And so these practices then comprise the kind of meaning of the great vehicle.
Oh, yeah. Chadwe. Yeah, not this. That is just also. Yeah.
So we're out of time for today, so we will leave it there for now.
That's the tendency in the.
To be sure, I'm really going to make a mark this time. We're going to remember where we were.
Oh, this is that is.
Genrobache Kajinche, and thank you so much, Katrina, for your skillful interpretation. See everyone at the same time next week, Mondays at 9 o'clock Pacific. We'll close with some prayers.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Randa Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh, yeah.